I paid 25 pence to see a 280, baby.
I remember a friend at school, he had a giant potato.
I don't remember seeing a pumpkin until I was in my 20s.
Yeah. He sounds so poor. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Happy Halloween. I suppose we could say Happy New Year. Could we?
Yeah, I suppose. In the old calendar, Halloween was the end of the year. Yeah. A bit like Christmas or whatever.
Yeah, I remember Halloween very differently than it happens now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like when you were a kid.
Yeah, when I was a kid, Halloween used to pass at school with nothing happening. Maybe we'd make something in a class like out of sugar paper,
or like a really big build up on Blue Peter.
Blue Peter, yeah. They always did stuff that looked way out of reach.
Yeah. All with like a squeezy lemon bottle, squeezy washing up liquid bottles.
Yeah, and scissors that were so sharp that they would just cut anything.
Always get an adult to supervise.
Yeah,
etc. Yeah. Well, I mean, when we were kids, there was none of this. There's no pumpkin thing going on. Maybe a turnip. I remember a friend at school. He had a giant potato, and you can't say names.
I won't say names. I don't know the name anyway.
Yeah. He made one out of a big potato and then hollowed it out, put a candle in it, and at the end of the night he ate it because it cooked inside.
What the fuck?
Pumpkins weren't readily available. I don't remember seeing a pumpkin until I was in my 20s.
Yeah. He sounds so poor.
Well, anyway, I'm festive. It's Happy New Year.
Yeah,
so
Happy New Year.
In the old Celtic way. I like it.
The only way, let's face it.
The only way. Yeah. Another thing we need to face is that Halloween is here to stay.
Well, yeah, it's gained a popularity over the last few years. It's really ramped up. I mean, it's all the crap you can buy.
Yeah, I was in a supermarket the other day and I saw a resin skeleton of a dog. Well, it might have been a werewolf. Werewolf, I've always thought, is the coolest of all of the monsters for Halloween.
Of all the Halloweeny monsters?
Yeah, the big three. Well, I call it the big three. Other people would argue that there's more than three. But I think you got the vamp, Frankie, and the werewolf. Frankenstein.
Oh, right.
The monster.
The monster?
Yeah.
Not the scientist.
Oh, yeah. Well, I suppose, in a way, the scientist was the scary element of that story.
Ooh, chimes with the times.
Yeah. Scary scientists making strides in medical cures, which turn out to be monstrous. Mentioning no names.
So, yeah, these pumpkins, for instance, some academics. By the way, may I point out that we are not academics, we're scholars. This is just purely stuff we're interested in. Many academics and folklorists and anthropologists, stuff like that, think that these are remnants of a Celtic head cult. So what they used to do is they used to excarnation. So when they died, they didn't bury them. What they did is they used to put them on stilts outside, and all the crows and the critters and whatnot would come and feast off of the bones. And then what they'd do is they'd take the bones once they'd been stripped, and then they used to incorporate the bones actually into the houses. And there's been archaeological digs, and they've actually found this stuff. They found skulls in the wall. Now, I can't remember who it was, whether it was Julius Caesar or whether it was another dude. Can't remember his name. But he talked about them talking to the skulls for wisdom, to gain wisdom from their ancestors. This is Celtic. This is like, there's no such thing as Celtic really. It's a collection of tribes with some sort of stylistic thread running through it. There's various different languages in what they call the Celtic tribes, but in sort of what we think of as the old Celtic communities, sort of Scotland, Ireland, Wales maybe, they used to talk to these skulls for wisdom from their ancestors to gain insight into how they should proceed in the future. So family would take the head of someone who's recently deceased, yeah,
and stick it on the shelf in the house.
Maybe in an alcove.
And talk to it.
Yeah.
Isn't the Mexican Day of the Dead like an offshoot?
This is the thing. If you look all around the world, everyone thinks Halloween is just like a Northern Latitude thing. It's not. It's all over the world. So in Japan, they've got something that's around the same time where they honour the dead. They've got it in South America. They've got it in parts of Africa. They've got it all over the world. Like places like Egypt, they had a similar sort of tradition around this time of the year.
In Egypt,
in Japan, in Australia, places like Fiji, the Philippines, they've got the same thing around the same time. So it's like end of October, early November. They've all got these similar traditions that chime with Halloween. So is Halloween to do with the losing of the light and the sun going down and all that lot? No. There's been some incredible research into this sort of thing by big guy beard that isn't you, Randall Carlson.
There's a name to
talk about.
It's a name.
Yeah, it's a
Randall
name.
Carlson.
He's a man.
He's a very interesting.
He is interesting. But
so what's he got to say about it?
A couple of things. One is this bull cult.
Bull cult.
The cult of the bull, which is one of the oldest cults.
Yeah.
And also there's stuff to do with the Pleiades.
The star system.
The cluster of stars. Yeah, you got Orion, you got Taurus, and then on the shoulder-ish of Taurus, you've got the Pleiades. If you look on the prime meridian at midnight, so that's facing south, and you look directly up above you, the Pleiades is right there. Now, the reason he talks about this is because, Randall Carlson's all about the deluge. So, he's all about that.
Yeah, he's all about the deluge.
The cataclysm, the flood, the great floods. There's two things. Something happens twice a year, and it's to do with Taurus and the Pleiades. And that is, the orbit of the Earth passes through what we call the Taurids.
Okay.
Now, the Taurids are a bunch of meteorites.
Okay.
And you've probably heard of the Leonids.
I've heard of the Leonids, yeah.
They sort of emanate. The emanation of the Leonids is from Leo. The Pleiades, there's an emanation of stuff.
Cosmic dust or something?
No, not more than cosmic dust, like actual large bodies.
Yeah.
Rocks. Comet tail. Anyway, he thinks that Halloween and the remembrance of the dead and all the scary stuff that comes up at this time of year, he thinks it comes from some sort of memory of a great cataclysm of something that came out of Taurus and hit the earth.
Oh, right.
This is why
it makes sense.
This is why you've got these sort of similar things around November, end of October. All these little ritual ceremonies, traditions that crop up, not only in the northern hemisphere but also in the southern hemisphere. So
that's why it's linked with terror.
Yeah,
and
horror.
Fright, horror.
Fright, yeah. Not only that, I mean, obviously you've got to take into consideration the fact that the sun's lower in the sky and you don't get as much light and it goes dark earlier and it's cold and freezing. And to our ancestors, don't forget, they would have been fairly hungry. They're not like we are. They're not well fed. You imagine the onset of winter. It must have been terrifying. A lot of these scientists suggest that that's the only reason that all these little traditions crop up. But I find Randall Carlson's argument quite a stimulating one, interesting.
I always like listening to him when I see him on certain podcasts and things like that. He's a very interesting fellow.
If you are interested in Randall Carlson, he's got a website and he does a podcast. I suggest you go and have a good look at it because it's fascinating stuff. Okay, if you stay with us during the video, you will get the chance to win this absolutely amazing art print, which was done by Nick, who's not here at the moment. It's on 160 GSM paper, archival, and top quality inks. And it was part of an exhibition for the Whale and Dolphin Conservancy last year. They are signed and numbered, and you will get the chance to win that if you're interested. During the video, there will be 2 visual clues. Those 2 visual clues will form the basis of a word. If you drop that word into the comments and you're the first one, you can win it We will put it in a postal tube and we will post it to you. If you don't win today, no matter. In upcoming videos, there's going to be other giveaways. They're just as exciting.
Be prepared for the strange, the weird, and the scary.
For me, Wolfman is number one because of the music that he would probably listen to.
What would he listen to?
AC/DC, without a doubt.
No Adele then. What monster would listen to Adele?
That's a good question. What monster would listen to Adele? I know. The creature from the Black Lagoon. Because he lives in a lagoon.
What's that got to do with Adele? Lagoon music.
Lagoon music, yeah.
I dig that lagoon music. He might be a country boy because he always wears a plaid shirt. Oh no, that's not a werewolf, that's a wolf man. There's a distinct difference.
Is it?
Yeah.
Go on. Fill me
a
in.
wolf man is a half man with the head of a... He's just hairy. And he's got the head of a wolf.
Okay, so we're discerning between creatures here. So you got a wolf man, you got a werewolf. They're not the same.
No, I'd say not. And looking at the history of them, there seems to be that distinction between them.
I don't think you can ever find the beginning of where these tales come from.
If we're looking at an origin for the werewolf, I think you look no further than your own hearth dogs.
Dogs?
Dogs. The domestication of the dog. Did we domesticate them or did they domesticate us? Where do you think the werewolf mythology, the werewolf folklore, the stories, the tales,
I always
the
thought
nightmares?
I always thought that the werewolf was a metaphor for hidden human desires.
Do you mean like that clip out of Dracula? where Gary Oldman, kept the count. Don't do the impression. What did he say? Let's get into
human desire.
Oh, he does that at weddings as well. Yeah, I see what you mean. You know, because it's like civilization and being able to use a pen and all those things separate us from the beasts of the field, the low self, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. What would be the earliest representation of a werewolf?
Well, we'll come to that, but I think the domestication of the dog, so scholars and academics and scientists and such, they think that the domestication of the dog probably stems back probably 50,000 to 30,000 years ago. At some point we started to domesticate something that was living alongside us. Now that is obviously the wolf, because the genetics of the dog and the genetics of the wolf are identical. You can breed a Chihuahua with a wolf. If you think about a wolf, they're so much like us. So they live in groups.
Packs. Hierarchical.
They've got a hierarchy too.
Yeah.
They're clever, they're cunning. They've got guile. They feed on the same things we feed on. They hunt in the same way we do, essentially. It's just that human beings learn to sharpen a stick, but they chase things down over huge distances. I mean, if you want to see this, it still happens now. Places of Africa, the Hadza tribe, for instance, they run for days chasing an antelope or gazelle or something like that. Days and days to wear it down. So it's like, I suppose you call it, is a symbiotic mutualism. So they have got a mutual relationship with us at some point. Now, what I'm talking about here is living off the things that we leave behind. That sounds like the Wombles.
Late as usual. Sorry, I was just having an extra 40 wigs.
So they get something from us, we get something from them, which is keeping away other predators. Because the presence of a wolf in an area will keep all the other predators at bay.
So it's a contract in a way.
Yeah. Over time, what you get is you get these wolves that have got characteristics which, you know, lend themselves to human society. In fact, in the 1960s, Dmitry Balyev, so he bred these foxes. So he took docile foxes and took other docile foxes and bred them together. And he took really aggressive foxes and really aggressive foxes and bred them together. So, and within 20 generations, he got, in the docile foxes, he got essentially a domesticated dog. So within 20 generations, he got a domesticated animal that wagged its tail, that had ears that went back, and it's a word for this, neoteny.
What?
Neoteny. It's where we find things cute.
Neoteny.
Yeah, neoteny. We find things cute, and they showed all these traits, and they were companions. However, the aggressive foxes, with the other aggressive foxes, he termed them the dragons, and he had to let them go because they were absolutely wild and could not be tamed in any way, shape or form.
Wow, imagine.
And that was in 20 generations, so it's not hard to think that this happened, but it would have obviously happened in a much longer time period. I mean, look at those Chinese ones.
Chinese ones?
Yeah, like the Shih Tzus. I mean, if you have a look at Empress temples and stuff like that in China, they've got these dogs, the Fu dogs, and they sit on the top of steps and guard palaces and all that lot. They were bred particularly to look like that. It's like most dogs now. It's fashion.
Yeah.
All dogs.
I understand it.
I like all dogs. There's no dogs that I don't like. I like all dogs.
I want something's flesh.
What is the first encounter you ever had with a wolfman?
I was attacked by one.
You were attacked by a real wolfman?
At 12 years old, it certainly seemed that way. There's a fair that used to come round every summer. Do you remember?
You mean like a travelling fair, like carnies?
Yeah, like a carnival type fair.
Yeah.
You remember they had a freak show tent thing and everything. It was weird. There was this exhibit called the Wolfman. And what it was a U-shaped tent, like a tunnel. There was a man in a cage wearing a mask.
Like the wolfman in the film?
Yeah, he looked like a wolfman, so he was in ripped jeans. He had some sort of hairy boots on, and he had a hairy chest, and he had hairy hands, and he had a wolf's head. At the fair, there was this thing, all the kids used to hang around this tent. Oh, I'm going to see the wolfman and all this lot, so it was very exciting. So I thought it pays me money, and I'd go in, and I did. And when I got in there, he beat me up.
Did what? Did he take your money?
He took me money. He smashed me in the guts. What are you laughing at, you fucker?
I don't know, it's just funny.
Yeah, he smashed me in the guts and told me to give me all his money. But it's the perfect crime because there's no witnesses and only one person was allowed in at the time.
And you paid for it to happen?
Yeah, I paid for it to happen.
I remember that fair very well.
Do you remember me saying that? I don't know if you were there.
I paid 25 pence to see a 280, baby.
He took the lot and I came out crying and everyone laughed at me and they didn't believe me. And that's one of the problems with these tales of werewolves.
Nobody believes you.
Nobody believes me.
We've spoken about the domestication of the dog and where the origin of the story of the werewolf might come from. But what is the earliest instance the man being transformed into a wolf?
Yeah, so the earliest instance of this. Again, scholars and academics. But the thing is, something that's written down would go back so much further than when it was written down. The actual earliest story, I think, is the Epic of Gilgamesh.
The Epic of Gilgamesh, have you got a date for that?
It's about 4,000 years ago, so about 2100 BC. Gilgamesh spurned a lover. She had had a previous relationship. She got really cheesed off with him, so she turned him into a wolf.
Cheesed off with a shepherd?
Yeah.
Turned him into a wolf.
So then what happened is the wolf was turned on by his own shepherd dogs and they ripped him apart. So Gilgamesh went, bollocks to that, I'm not having any bit of that. So that's the earliest instance of a wolf transformation.
So you move it all the way forward to Greece.
Sort of, Jason the Argonaut Solar, Lycon, King of Arcadia. So this, he's like any king. He push the luck. So what he does is he thinks, well, Zeus is all powerful. Let's kill one of his kids and feed him to see if he sort of figure out if he's eating human flesh or not. Zeus finds out, obviously, because he's all powerful, gets pissed off, turns Lycon into a wolf. He turns him into a wolf type man. A wolf man.
A wolf man.
Anyway, moving on again with the Greek thing. This is where the idea of the modern werewolf comes from, because of Ovid and what he wrote.
Ovid, Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so he describes how someone is actually transformed, like, you see an American werewolf in London, like agonising, becoming, howling, growing fur. It's Ovid in his description. I think you mentioned it in your little film you made.
We have made a little film, and we're going to play that now.
Primal fear, as ancient as thought. In that infancy around the fire, seeking harbour from hunger and cold, distant flashing motes of red spectral eyes orbiting the hearth. Ice creeps up the spine as the pack encircles the camp. The black mantle of night then bares its teeth. My first memory, introduction to the werewolf, was a cartoon when I was around 8 or 9, Fangface, an ABC production. Then came the trading cards, action figures and so on. To my young mind, the werewolf was no more frightening than an episode of Scooby-Doo. By the time I reached 12 years old, this changed. I saw a film which haunted my dreams for months to come. The John Landis masterpiece, An American Werewolf in London.
I can assure you that this is not in the least bit amusing. Good Lord.
It left me terrified, but also fascinated, as I know many viewers are too. Maybe something in our DNA or a genetic memory. The fear of the werewolf is probably as old as the human species, and its origins can be traced back in the written records to the earliest form of writing. The first written evidence of this nightmare creature is contained in the Epic of Gilgamesh, produced about 4,000 years ago. This tale would obviously go back much further in time and was a verbal story long before it was written down. Gilgamesh spurned a potential suitor because she magically turned her previous lover into a wolf creature. This idea of a human-wolf hybrid most probably stems from our proximity to them in our ancient past. They hunt in packs, as do we, have hierarchical groups, intelligence, and they prey on and eat the very same animals. They are our clever rivals and have been for most of human existence. It's not difficult to imagine an admiration of their guile, determination, and ferocity developing in us. It's only in the last 300 to 400 years that this has changed drastically. These creatures would revel in combat and slaughter, which is something humans excel at, delighting in the post-battle feast of the dead and mortally wounded. Some Nordic tribes adopting them as totem animals in battle, just like the berserkers or bear shirts. The Ulfednar are described in legend as wearing wolfskins as mantles, channeling the ferocity of the wolf in combat, becoming wolf-like, tenacious, fearless, an act of transformative magic. Odin himself has 2 pet wolves, Jerry and Freki, as well as 2 ravens, obviously. Both of these creatures are to be found in the aftermath of battle and even Odin could not defend himself against the ferocity of Fenrir the wolf that devours the sun in the time of Ragnarok. The wearing of wolf pelts as either disguise or an attempt to become something other also arises in other pagan cultures like ancient Greece and the Slavic provinces. In the Trojan War, Dolon wears a wolf skin, stalking into the Greek soldiers' camp, slaughtering them and King Rhesus of Thrace. The Greek historian Herodotus recounts tales of the Nurai tribes, now modern-day Belarus, the shamans of the tribe turning themselves into wolves for 3-day revels, and probably most famously in Ovid's Metamorphoses, the description of King Laocoon of Arcadia, which is most likely the seed of the modern werewolf as we know it, with cannibalism, violent murder, immorality, and, most importantly, physical transformation. He tried to speak, but his voice broke into an echoing howl. His ravening soul infected his jaws. His murderous longings were turned on the cattle. He still was possessed by bloodlust. His garments were changed into a shaggy coat, and his arms into legs. He was now transformed into a wolf. These tales spread across Europe, as did a religion from the deserts of the Middle East, which was now being enforced, usurping the old beliefs and ways. Christianity had arrived, and it had a habit. The habit of incorporating indigenous beliefs and stories, appropriating them to its own ends. The rise of this religion and the building of monasteries across Northern Europe also gave rise to one of the largest economies of the medieval period: wool. The monastic system was driven by the wool and the natural enemy of the livestock which produced it. The wolf became the enemy of the church, threatening its livelihood. The wolf now took on a new, terrifying persona, that of a demonic terror, a threat to the flock in every sense, morally and physically. Prejudice and fear was encouraged from the pulpits. Bounties were placed on them, and slowly but surely the wolves were incorporated into accounts of shape-shifting witches and murders. These tales and histories over the centuries, due to invasion and migration, cross-pollinate, get tacked on to other stories and beliefs, embellished, embroidered, and morph into modern and emerging mythologies. It's in the medieval period that the recognisable modern idea of the werewolf or wolfman takes root in the hearts and minds of the folk, and written accounts of transformations and werewolves wreaking havoc in towns and villages that we might be familiar with, particularly in Germany, where wolf enchanters or charmers were employed, extolling the ability to charm wolves away from livestock. When it didn't work, which was more often than not, the wolf enchanter would then be suspected of the slaughter of the animals and even the slaying and eating of children, and branded as werewolves. A werewolf craze erupted in Germany, and many werewolf trials, similar to witch trials, took place, most famously the case of the Bedburg werewolf, Peter Stub. There are various pronunciations of his name. Through the medieval and early modern period, virtually every region of Europe has accounts, tales, and folklore surrounding the werewolf, and shows no sign of abating, with many emerging stories and sightings circulating with great speed in the digital age, from the Michigan Dogman, Skinwalker, and Rougarou of North America, to Old Stinker and the Cannock Chase werewolf in the UK. The werewolf is still with us, and probably always will be.
Yeah, so the Vikings, there's a long history. I mean, if Odin, he had two. You imagine ending up as a wolf turd. Because that's what he did. Fenrir, the wolf of Ragnarok, Odin. Takes us back to the domestication of the dog. Now, the reason I mention the domestication of the dog, during that process, you imagine one of those wolves that wasn't quite tamed. That neoteny thing hadn't kicked in. So your dog, it's 1 minute it's sitting round the hearth with you chewing on a bone, the next minute it's got your throat.
So if we go forward from the Vikings, and we go to medieval,
we've got the medieval period. So obviously the wolf is then victimised because of its threat to the livelihood of these monasteries,
right?
And obviously over time, people have got this association of wolf with evil, and then what you get is the rise of the persecution of anyone who's a bit different. So witches. So those attributes that the wolf's got, and the new attributes that have been given by the church, the wolf, or someone who behaved like a wolf, or showed some sort of behaviour that was similar to a wolf, in the medieval mind, they'd have thought, well, maybe he's a wolf. He's not a human being. He's a wolf. And then tried him for being a wolf. So, you got the Viking thing, which was describing people with wolf attributes as warriors, and then you've got a threat to livelihood with the church, the Christians, and they was then changed that, into the wolf's got all these nasty bits to it because it's taken away from our livelihood, so let's persecute it. And those attributes then get placed on human beings who are a menace or causing sort of injury or criminal damage or harm to someone, and they get lumped in with it. So that's where the idea of lycanthropy comes from. At the same time, you get this persecution of the witch. So you get the witch trials. So especially places like Germany, German culture at that time, you don't want to be associating with the witch at all. You find yourself on the end of a pitchfork. Certainly in Germany.
Beware the moonlights.
Peter Stumpf, he's a very interesting case because when he was in his early teens, he developed an interest in the occult.
Necromancy, no doubt.
Necromancy was in there. And
there's always necromancy. Go on.
Always necromancy. And he sold his soul
to the company store,
to the devil, and he received a belt.
Seems fair.
In the folklore, the way that you would become a werewolf is to wear a belt made from wolfskin.
A little bit like the pelts of the Ulfednar Vikings.
Yeah. You become this fiend.
Yeah.
From the text, the devil apparently saw him as a fit instrument to perform mischief as a wicked fiend.
Where did this happen?
In a village called Bedburg. He had a huge body count.
Yeah.
It stopped counting after 14 children and 2 women. The 2 women that were mentioned were pregnant at the time, and he ate the fetuses. Is that the plural of fetus?
Yeah.
He attacked his son while he was in wolf form. He ate his son's brains as a savoury and dainty, delicious meal.
Obviously, he was a wrong one.
He was a wrong one.
He's a right bad in workhouse. So, what happened to him?
A posse was mustered and sent out to catch this wolf. They cornered the wolf, and he released himself from the belt, from the girdle, and he transformed from a wolf into a human in front of this posse.
Well, they actually saw this.
Apparently they witnessed it.
Yeah, okay, we get all that. What was his end? How did his end come about?
The execution of Stump on the 31st of October 1589, alongside his daughter Bill and mistress Catherine, is one of the most brutal on record. He was put to the wheel where flesh was torn from his body in 10 places with red-hot pincers,
From the little jailer's pit, aren't we?
followed by his arms and legs. Then his limbs were broken with the blunt side of an axe head to prevent him from returning from the grave. Before he was beheaded, his body burned on a pyre. His daughter and mistress had already been flayed and strangled and were burned along with Stump's body. As a warning against similar behaviour, local authorities erected a pole with the torture wheel and the figure of a wolf on it. And at the very top, they place Peter Stump's severed head. So there you go. That is Peter Stump's story, and I think everybody should know about that.
It's fascinating, and it does seem strange that it's never been turned into a film. A lot of werewolf trials, things like the charmers, so the wolf enchanters, who used to make a living by, telling people who've got livestock that I can get rid of the wolves for you. So you proclaim to be a wolf charmer, your charms don't work on the wolves then go and attack. They're going to peg you as a werewolf, they're going to peg you as a wolfman or whatever. Anyway, it was a long time ago. There's a famous case in France, the Beast de Gévaudan. They actually made a film out of that story was made a film of.
Brotherhood of the Wolf.
That's the film, yeah. This area in France called Gévaudan. There was a creature attacking people, particularly women and children. Cut a long story short, they actually captured it. Now, the werewolf wasn't actually a werewolf. It was an escaped hyena. And the bones of this thing, the remains of this thing, still exist in a Paris museum. Like a natural history museum.
Oh, right, okay.
Not like an art museum. Thinking of art, the American artist Walton Ford did some fantastic work on the Beast of Gévaudan. Yeah, but moving on to, obviously there's all these tales and stories you can go and look at yourself, but what about now? What about werewolves in the UK, for instance?
Do we have werewolves in the UK?
Yeah, we do. There's a huge amount of tales. Obviously you've got the tales from Ireland, largely mythological, and the Ulster cycle and things like that. Recently, bringing it right up to date, we've got Old Stink, Kingston upon Hull,
right, okay.
up in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
But this tale in one form or another has been around for about 200 years. Cannock Chase.
Oh, Cannock Chase, yeah.
Yeah, down in South Staffordshire way.
Yeah.
And since about 1975, there's been over 20 reported sightings of werewolf-type creatures. But that seems to be a place where it's just weird going on all the time. There's one in Scotland, Shetland, called the Wolver.
Okay.
It lives in a cave. But the word Wolver, they think it's a Norse word, and it is actually a Norse word for fairy, which brings us to fairies.
Okay, that's a bigger subject, I think, than even werewolf.
It's huge, and maybe we'll talk about it another day. But in English mythology and folklore, there's a lot of it is about this thing called the black dog, or black shuck, or the padfoot. It's got loads of different sorts of names. In other parts of the country they call it the barghest.
Wow, that's the first I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, and it's like a huge dog. Around where sort of we are, is sort of in the Midlands sort of area, it's known as Black Annis. It's ghostly black. It's usually ghostly. Is it more of a ghost story or a werewolf story? I don't know, but it sort of brings us back to dogs.
Now we're back to where we were.
It brings us back to this relationship that is thousands and thousands of years old with these animals that have lived alongside us, that have been selectively bred from a wolf. But it's this, I can't get over this idea that this some sort of genetic memory thing is at work, along with stories and along with tales and along with mythology and folklore. And it's one of those archetypal animals that puts fear in us, like a spider or a snake. It fires something up the spine. You know what I mean? It's a very deep connection with an animal, and I think we've got that with dogs. There's other types of animal that people turn into, but none of them stick. Because you've got this man who turns into a crocodile, and you've got other sort of ridiculous animals that people turn into, even pigs and things, but none of them have got the traction that the werewolf's got. And I think that's to do with the relationship with dogs that we've got. The earliest instance of getting a dog to not attack you and rip your throat out, I think that took a long time. And there was an intermediary period where people would have got their throats ripped out. They would have been done in by wolves. But
So-
then obviously you've got the werewolf in the popular culture now, which is like a huge part of popular culture. I mean, it's in games. It's like, obviously, I mean, we've looked ourselves how many werewolf films have been made since the first one, which I think was 1913.
Yeah.
To now, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Most of them lurid, most of them really rubbish. But it's so ubiquitous now in popular culture that it's very difficult to fear. But I'm sure if you're out on the tundra, or you're in the American Midwest, places like Montana, and you're hiking and camping, and you hear that, it will stir something so primal in you. You will be glad that you took extra toilet paper. Yeah, but is the werewolf the coolest of all the monsters? I'd go along with that.
Happy Halloween.